This is the Final Word Cricket Podcast. I'm Adam Collins. The other guy is Geoff Lemon, back for another week of cricket conversation. And Geoff, it's not just us here in the Zoom window today. We have a number of our friends from the Patreon page.
Yes, we have a bunch, several dozen people have come to watch us do the show, which is nice. I've got someone in the waiting room. I'm just going to keep doing this manually because it'll feel like I'm bonding with people. So Paul Harmer is joining the chat. Good
Hello,
to know.
Paul.
Yeah, so we've got a few friends along for the ride today, which is nice.
We feel like when watching the IPL at the moment, we have a friend down the screen as well when Maxi's batting, who briefly wore the orange cap on Sunday afternoon. Yes, we're doing our IPL spots on YouTube, so we won't go into too much depth on that competition. And I know that most people would have already engaged with our chat with Maxi last week, but I put this on Twitter, and I may have said it on the podcast in the past, but watching Maxi bat at the moment, I get exactly the same feeling inside as I did when Dean Jones was coming towards the end of his career. Every time he was in, you just knew how important it was. And yeah, I think it's nice at the moment that, given he's our IPL correspondent, that we're very much invested in every delivery.
Many people are saying that it's because he's our IPL correspondent, because that faith was put in him before the thing even started. We said, "Yep, you're it." And ever since then, the pressure's off. He's been free to be himself, to play his shots. He's got a nice team that all seem to like him. AB de Villiers is saying nice things about him, so that probably helps your confidence as a batting player. And yeah, away we go.
Rach and I were walking around the garden centre with Winnie on Sunday, picking out some plants and being ever so domestic as Maxi was batting, and I was getting in strife for completely ignoring the task at hand in favour of watching him on the screen of my phone, but no regrets. I should say, by the way, hello to everyone who's watching on YouTube as I wave to my camera. I copped some stick last week from Michelle Garland, who I think is in the chat window at the moment, saying that when I look at the camera, it can be a bit abrupt. It can be a bit like I'm making sure it's still on and I'm not really that engaged. Well, I'll do a better job at looking down to my left. You'll get a different view this week as well, the mess of my living quarters as opposed to my living room. I've decided to shake it up a bit, given we have friends with us today. A piece of art behind my left shoulder that Rachel's mum made for us. Each dot on the canvas here is a slightly different colour. There's no two dots that are exactly the same. So thank you to Rachel's
mum. And there's
a
lesson in that for all of us. Have you considered going over to the camera like Australian Open style and just signing the lens, or like leaving a lipstick kiss on it or something?
I've wondered how many of those lenses, because they give them away, don't they, at the Australian Open? They sign the lens and then they end up going to someone in the crowd.
Yeah, it must be a Perspex cover, screen cover that they just slot in and get a new one out, like Dexter with his slides of blood. That
good
he
reference.
Very, very stupidly hides in the air conditioning vent. Like,
yes.
Mate, they're going to look in the air conditioning vent, you moron. Oh, I'm a forensic genius. Oh, look, I hid it under the couch.
Geoff, on the show today, we are going to be talking to Neil Manthorp, who is a friend of the show, one of the most well-regarded radio and television broadcasters in the world from South Africa, and also a forensic journalist on the game when it comes to all matters CSA. We've talked about the shambolic situation they're in the past, and there's been some fairly serious developments in the last few days, so no one better than Manners to steer us through that. We're going to talk about the Mr. Sheffield Shield final up at AB Field over the weekend. Lots of politics to trudge through. Some nerd pledge, some bannermans, all that you would expect on a weekly edition of The Final Word. And I want to start, though, with what I've called in our notes here, a job lot of sorts, politics, broadly interpreted as politics, off the field stuff, shall we say. The first bit of news on this front was that Jodie Hawkins lost her job during the week in a restructure at Cricket New South Wales. Geoff, perhaps you could pick it up and explain what Jodie was doing for a living until last week and why this jarred so very much when the news came out late last week.
General manager of the Sydney Sixers was that job, after, Jodie had previously been doing comms for Cricket New South Wales and for the Big Bash teams, got this job as GM. It went extremely successfully, 2 wins for the Sydney Sixers men's team in the last couple of years. And it's not that she was sacked, but it's that the job was made to disappear in a restructure that said that they were going to have sort of professional list managers but not have kind of general managers overseeing each of the 2 New South Wales BBL teams individually. And so as someone who'd done a really good job in that position, my understanding of it is she was basically offered another comms job, the job that she'd come out of a couple of years before to get that promotion, and understandably was not very interested in that. So there are supposedly practical reasons for the restructure, but it's a pretty average look for Cricket New South Wales when the executive team reporting to the boss now is all male, 4 blokes reporting to the other bloke, and someone who's a very, very well-respected operator in the game is not at the organisation anymore.
Yeah, the point they made, Cricket New South Wales, was that this restructure has been 18 months in the make since they changed chief executive back in 2019, I think it was. But nevertheless, the fact that Jodie has essentially overseen 2 winning campaigns, it seems odd that she'd be put in this situation where she can basically take her old job or leave the organisation. As Pete Lawler observed on Offsiders on Sunday, it's not as though she's going to be short of a job. I mean, she's going to be picked up in the cricket industry sooner rather than later, you'd imagine, given her track record. But it doesn't paint a good picture that a high-profile administrator who's a woman in our game can do really well and still find themselves squeezed in a situation like this. It's there was surely a better way than putting her in this sort of situation.
I think maybe it won't be in cricket, and that's really that's the thing to be concerned about. That when you've got such a sort of blokes industry, and then you've got women who do really well in it and aren't given the credit that they're due, basically, they tend to go elsewhere and get lost to cricket and go and do something else. And why wouldn't you? If you're being treated as though your contribution wasn't really that worthwhile in the end, why not go and work for a bank or something? You probably get paid better and have less stress to deal with.
Geoff, I'm sure you saw the fierce debate during the week around Cricinfo changing their terminology, cricket terminology, to be gender neutral. And I say you would have noted the response because, I mean, it's nothing that we haven't talked about for years on The Final Word. And in some respects, the journey that we've been on as a couple of journalists, I think reflects where a lot of people have got to on this. Of course, it's not the first time that Cricinfo have been involved in this. Andrew Wu wrote a piece a couple of years ago about the origin story of the term Chinaman, and that was enough to prompt them to revert to talking about left arm wrist spin as opposed to that. And Sambit Bal wrote in an editorial that accompanied this decision last week that it was the same process they went through when it came to man cutting. They realised that there was a better way of doing it. Now they refer to running out a batsman whilst backing up, or now it'll be a batter whilst backing up after this decision made last week. So it'll be no longer batsman, it'll be batter across the board, Geoff. And yes, I think a good place to start this chat would be to say where you and I were, because we were adamant until a couple of years ago that it should remain batsman on account of the fact that women who we respected in the game felt that way as well. Principally Izzy Westbury, who spoke at length on The Final Word about this probably in 2015, going back to the very start of the show. And over time, her mind was changed by Mel Jones, and in turn us by her, about the idea that there's enough women in the game who don't like batsmen that it offsets the argument that batsman in itself is a gender-neutral term if interpreted the same way that we would say actor, for instance, which is the most, I suppose, relevant comparison.
Yeah, I think maybe that was an England-Australia split as well, because if you look at either men's or women's cricket, a lot of Australian players, men's players, were using batter for both. Michael Clarke did routinely, Andrew Simons, these kind of players, they just said the batters and the bowlers. And it used to give people who covered the game the shits. Why are they using this Americanism? And as Australians especially, we're always very angry about American usage. We don't want any part of that. Sure, we'll have their Coca-Cola and we'll watch Friends, but we're not going to use the same words as they use in Friends. If they take the U out of colour, we'll be very pissed off about it. So that it seemed like that was kind of the established approach to it. And yeah, I mean, I think I went along with that. I thought, well, it's about how you use the word, and so if the word isn't being exclusively applied to male players, then it can be applied to either. And the more English sort of perspective on it was that batsman was sort of a term of respect, and to be called that was an honorific in a way, and that you wanted to accord that respect to women as well as to men, and that makes sense to a degree, but all of that relies on people who already know what's going on inside the game. If you've already got that context, then yeah, that does make sense. But the argument about the updating of language, and I fully understand people who get shitty about things changing because they think, well, I'm used to this and I like this being the way it is, and why does it have to be different? But you think about it from the perspective of someone who is outside cricket and has never been part of it. And if that person is, 8 years old and a girl, and they hear you talking about batsman and third man and all the rest of it, then it does sound gender-loaded, even if you don't intend it to be. That's how it's going to come across to someone who doesn't have the context. And so that's the point that somewhere like Cricinfo or someone like Mel Jones is concerned about, is the people who might or might not come into the game, or the people who might not feel like they're welcome into the game because the game's language is telling them that it's for men. And so in the end, it's a pretty easy thing to change. It doesn't take a great deal of effort to shift around the usage, and so why not do it? There's no harm in doing it, even if you sort of inherently don't really like the idea of doing it.
Yeah, that's well summed up and articulated. I think that the most powerful part of Sambit's piece was rhetorically asking, in a way, why did it take so long for them to come to this decision, and answering that in the next breath by saying that it's never too late to do the right thing. And I think that's where they've landed on this, that yes, it'll piss a lot of people off. And we've seen that a number of people have said they'll delete the Cricinfo app, and and so on,
sure.
and so on it goes.
Fine.
And that's to be expected. But suggesting that language doesn't matter, which is the other side of this, that, what does it matter? It's symbolic, it's virtue signalling, it's and all the other catch-all terms. Remember, it used to be 10 years ago, it was political correctness gone mad. We don't hear that so often these days, but it's just a replacement now when talking about woke culture or whatever it is. Okay, well, if that's the case, then someone better tell the ECB and the 100, because last year they've gone out of their way to change the language of cricket, whether you like it or not. I'm not going to get into that debate right now. I mean, it jars at one level that wickets will be called outs in the 100, but if language didn't matter, they wouldn't be taking such a divisive call on something like that. Sure, there's another side of it, a cynical side of it, which maybe that was to get their competition in the press for a number of days. But stepping aside from that, language does matter, and the way that we articulate different parts of the game can be a barrier on more people accessing it. And I think that if this can play some small role in making cricket a game that more people feel comfortable engaging with, then, well, what harm's done? I can't see a lot of damage, and let's push on with it.
Yeah, it's a price to pay thing. And there is, there is something about the sounds of words that you're used to using that is nice. Saying great batsmanship does sound satisfying in a kind of crusty Henry Blofeld sort of way. I can remember being very, very strongly opinioned about this 20 years ago, that, all of this stuff was bullshit and you shouldn't be, why were chairmen becoming chairs and all the rest of it? You just treat it as the name of the person who's in the job, and whoever they are is whoever they are. And that has a certain logical consistency, but it's a position that has evolved over time, and that I've ended up looking at almost 180 degrees the opposite over that period of time.
In terms of other shifts that could be happening in the game, a really positive one that we can all get behind is that the ICC are meeting later this month to discuss expanding the Men's World Cup from 10 to 14 teams. This story bobbed up a couple of weeks ago in the Telegraph, courtesy of Tim Wigmore. We didn't get a chance to talk about it then, but it felt like a good week to quickly flag it now. So we know it'll be a 10-team event in 2023, as it was in 2019. But the support is growing for it to return to 14 teams, as it was in 2015 and 2011. So, yeah, the chief executives will consider this at their next powwow that's taking place at the end of April. And the other part of this is that the T20 World Cup for men this could expand to 20 teams in that 2027 to 2031 cycle, which they're considering at the moment as they go through their various deliberations. And look, this is something that we've talked about so often ever since we started on The Final Word, really, that reducing the World Cup to 10 teams was regressive in so many ways and restrictive. And I'm glad that the thinking is now moving the other way, because we had that problem after the 2007 World Cup that India and Pakistan were eliminated in the group stage, and that was a fault of that ridiculous system that they used to incorporate 16 teams in the Caribbean that had nothing to do with how many teams were playing. It was a shortcoming of the way they set it up that year, which was why India were able to go home after 3 games. But there is definitely a better way to do it with 14 teams, and it'll mean that, again, we can continue to grow the sport.
It's quite comical though the rationales being given, where apparently what was being talked about in these meetings were, if we have more teams in the tournament, we could help grow the game in other countries and encourage enthusiasm in other places. And you're like, you did all of this in the 90s. You had exactly the same idea. You did the same thing. You put it in place, and then you threw it all out the window because India got knocked out in 07, and now it's like rediscovering it all over again. It seems fairly bizarre that it's being treated as a new exciting idea, but I suppose it's better than nothing.
Yeah, there's the suggestion in the story that Tim wrote that there's an incongruity that there are 12 full member nations and yet only 10 teams make it to that competition. And the same applies, of course, to the women. And the good news is that there's discussions around expanding the Women's World Cup from 8 teams as well at the moment. So, yeah, the thinking is decidedly shifted in a positive direction. I think the next bit to get right, though, of course, is going to be the format. We won't go into too much depth today, but for mine...
we won't let you.
No.
You would love that. You would love nothing better than 20 minutes on the format. I've seen you do it.
Give me 2 beers and set me off. No, the truth is they got the format right back in 2003, splitting it into 2 groups of 7 and running a Super 6, which was improved between 99 and 2003. Where they stuffed up was splitting it into 4 groups in 2007. So I hope that they look back at history of this and get to a place like that rather than simply going, 14 teams, quarterfinals, 8 in those, because there wasn't enough jeopardy in 2015 and that was a shortcoming of that format. So, yes, Geoff, good news on the whole.
Yeah, it's what you want to see, and they're treating the T20 World Cup as the one that can get even bigger, and why not? Although whether that's still kind of split into the pre-tournament qualifying thing that's not actually really the World Cup, not the real quiz,
yes,
then that's going to feel less satisfying if it's, let's have Nepal and Oman play each other for 3 weeks while no one pays any attention without them actually getting to play any of the good teams. So, yeah, it's always... grain of salt kind of stuff.
Geoff, confirmation since we last recorded that India's women will play a test match in England this June. It had been foreshadowed or announced really by the BCCI on Twitter on International Women's Day, as we subsequently learnt without consulting anyone, but that's okay. The good news is that they're coming out here as part of a multi-format series. The test is going to be at Bristol, not Lords. Geoff, we need to start campaigning from now until the next edition of the Women's Ashes in England, the Women's Ashes Test match in 2023 must be at Lords, but wasn't possible this time apparently. But yes, it'll be at Bristol, 16th to the 19th of June. Frustrating that it'll clash, the back end of that test will clash with the World Test Championship final down at Southampton, so they weren't able to quite get the timing right on that. As I understand it, that's partly a function of the fact that they didn't know they would be staging this test match until well after they put to bed the rest of the schedule. So that's annoying, but I suppose there's the good news is that they're playing a test match to begin with. New Zealand are also
coming. Is it overlapping the back end or the front end?
The fourth and fifth day of the women's test will be the first and second of the World Test Championship final. Okay. So the pointy end, unfortunately. So
yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's
works.
wrong. Sorry, that's the 16, 17, 18, 19, 4th. So the third and the 4th day, of course, is a 4-day test match. So day 1 and day 2 will be free of the men.
Day 3 and 4.
Yeah, so that's right.
Yeah, maybe that works in a way because maybe you get Indian media attention on England for that men's test match, and maybe it helps. I don't know.
Yeah,
there's a world in which it could be useful to have some shared resources, I suppose.
Well, what's good is they're going to use the multi-format point system that they use for the Ashes for this series. So there'll be 3 T20s and 3 one-day internationals. When New Zealand come out later in the summer in September for more white ball fun, it's 3 T20s and 5 one-days ending in the final week of September. So they're going deep into the season this year, the women, which is great. It offsets the fact that there was so few opportunities last year for them to play.
Why not play a test against New Zealand?
Well,
that was the other thing that jumped out at me is that New Zealand haven't played one since 2004. And I reckon that's probably an NZC thing as much as anything. They don't want to play a test in England because it might make their players think that they should deserve to play test matches, and we can't have that.
Well, Susie Bates has said many, many times on the record too, not just privately, that she thinks it's just a disgrace that she's not played a test match. She's quite on the front foot about this. So that is a bit disappointing that she won't get a chance this year. But no, I like the fact that the multi-format point system is being rolled out beyond just the Women's Ashes, which I should add are following straight on really from the end of the England women's home season. Although I understand that it might be played in January this time. Last time in 2017 they popped it into October. They might delay it because the England women will need to then go to New Zealand for the World Cup. So heaps of cricket is the good news compared to the pandemic year in 2020 where they really did miss out. But yeah, the one slightly concerning bit of commentary overnight came from Australia, Geoff, and that was from Belinda Clark, who, I mean, all this momentum around women's test cricket in the last week or so following this announcement, and she essentially poured cold water on the idea that there'll be more of it in the short term from an Australian perspective, saying that her view is that the white ball formats are the ones that need investing in, that we shouldn't be diversifying resources into test cricket until, I think she said, until 10 to 15 women's teams are doing well at 20 and 50 over cricket. Then we can look at sort of almost going back to test cricket once that foundation's laid. But yes, for this generation of Australian women's cricketers, let's hope they get a test match in England in 2 years' time, frankly.
We don't currently have 12 to 15 teams in men's cricket being given opportunities or treated as though they're actually worth playing. You know, we've got about 4 teams who get treated that way. And if that doesn't exist in the men's game, it's a pretty ridiculous target to say that that's how things should be in the women's game before you start moving anything else forward. Like this idea of always having to wait for the right time, you know, that's why the AFL was so sort of hesitant to actually back their league and have been so sort of half-hearted about actually backing what they did versus what Cricket Australia did in 2015 when they went, all right, we'll make the big bash and we'll back it in all the way. And they've done that and it has worked. So they've had their own precedent. You know, they're the ones who've demonstrated that these things can work when you put the effort into them. And yeah, look, even if you were only playing tests against 3 or 4 of the other countries rather than, you know, more than that, all right, well, fine, that would at least be a start to have it as something to be strived for.
Yeah, and we understand, everybody understands that more red ball cricket is needed at a domestic level to make test matches viable, and that's fine. I mean, in the WNCL, there's professional contracts all over the place now. That's a great thing, and likewise in England, after the regional structure was set up in 2020, there's never been a better opportunity for 2 and 3 day cricket at a domestic level. Geoff, are you feeling Olympic?
Yes, am I? Yes, like the gods of Mount Olympus, the 12 of them. What they all got eaten by their father, and then except for Zeus, who had to murder him and cut them all out, something like that.
This just reinforces that you went to a far nicer school than I did. The Are You Feeling Olympics, a Cool Runnings reference, of course. 2028, it feels like it's on. So there have been quite a few developments here. So 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles were announced last year that it's going to be there. And now the steps that have taken place in recent times are that the BCCI have consented to send a team to Birmingham for the 2022 Commonwealth Games, where women's T20 cricket is going to be played next year, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, a roadblock in the past has been that the BCCI didn't want to get too involved in this Olympic shenanigans because it might obscure some of their bilateral commitments. It might mean that once every 4 years that they can't put together an entire program at home, and thus they would lose money as the BCCI.
Yeah, it also meant that they would have less control over the running of their sport because the Indian Olympic Committee would have some say over things like doping, anti-doping structures and bans and reports and all the rest of it. And the BCCI don't enjoy not being able to control everything that they want to control.
Exactly, including the ICC. So that's probably shapes the way the ICC's come at this in recent times. I know they were having a conversation around the 2024 Olympics probably 4 or 5 years ago, and they didn't quite get to that point. But here we are, talking about 2028 and the fact that the BCCI have reportedly said that they would be willing to send a men's and a women's team, and it feels like this is the floodgates opening moment. The IOC have said repeatedly that the Olympic movement doesn't penetrate South Asia quite as much as it does other parts of the world, and they see cricket as a vehicle, and rightly so, given the volume of people who'd be watching if India were, or any team in the Indian subcontinent found themselves at the pointy end of an Olympic Games. It'd be an astonishing event. So all the bits and pieces will be debated: what format, how they do it, how many teams, and all the rest. But the very fact we've got to this point, and Tristan Lavalette, our colleague on the freelance beat, has been writing about this for Forbes magazine, and he broke a story saying that the ICC actually have an Olympic subcommittee now, which is great news because Ian Watmore's on it. Now, Ian Watmore is the chairman of the ECB. So if a chairman of one of the big three countries is involved in this at ICC level, that to me, Geoff, feels like some serious muscle is being flexed in Dubai from an ICC perspective, which, I mean, there are different views as to whether the Olympic Games should include cricket. Of course, it did once before back in 1900 where it was just England, or should I say that... No, was it
France.
It was France, but I'm not sure if it was called... It would have been called Great Britain, wouldn't it? Great Britain would have... I assume that's how it would have been in 1900, although I wonder whether they were competing as Great Britain then. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They beat France in the one Olympic final. But yeah, the idea, Geoff, that I suppose it's the theme of the show today, isn't it? Growing the game. They've always wanted America to have a bigger footprint in cricket. Of course, there's the looming China story in cricket, which is fantastic. And if there's IOC incentive to invest in the game at a local level, that's surely what we'll see if there's medals up for grabs. And that, Geoff, directly feeds into our conversation with Roberto Moretti a couple of weeks ago and Cricket Brazil, who know that this is their way through in order to progress.
Who are desperate to get Olympic inclusion because of the funding that will mean, and that's not just a Brazil thing, that applies to dozens of countries where funding would be vastly increased and much easier to come by and could transform cricket in those countries. So, really, as far as a worldwide thing, it seems like an absolute no-brainer. Maybe Ian Watmore's on the committee just so that he can sabotage it and so the big three can make sure we need one of our guys in there just to torpedo it and make sure it doesn't get up. That's the other way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But
I suppose...
Your suggestion that it's in America and that could be part of the thinking, that probably carries some weight. The only thing is that it's not... So basically what has happened, the story is that India have removed their objection. They're not going to get in the way of the proposal that cricket goes to 2028. That doesn't mean it will go to 2028 because it has to be accepted by the host Olympic organising body.
That's right.
So LA has to invite cricket, which means that LA has to be convinced by Cricket USA, the new version of the body after the old one got kicked out of the ICC and banned for being complete, absolute shitlords, and pretty much did a Cricket South Africa. Now that there's new Cricket USA, they've got to convince LA to let cricket come to the Olympics in 2028, but it will be as an exhibition sport. It'll be as a one-off exhibition sport. And then if they impress, if they do a good enough job, if the Mighty Ducks come through, then it might become a permanent sport from 2032 on. So, that's the way it's going. There's, nothing really tangible has happened except that basically India have said, we're going to stop getting in the way. But who knows? They could have a change of governance in a couple of years and completely reverse course, as they often do about many things. Yeah,
it's just a price signal. I mean, the Brazilian women's national team having full-time contracts, it was kicked along by this Olympic dream. Imagine what might be possible in other associate and affiliate nations if they think that there could be a route through the Olympic Games for them. So it's definitely good news. A week of predominantly good news. And also a week, Geoff, of some retirements at Australian domestic level. Delissa Kimmins has decided to pull the pin on her international and domestic career. What a great story Delissa Kimmins has been, of course, debuting as a teenager back in 2008, then taking this career break. I think from memory, she went straight to the UK, worked in a pub. I interviewed her about this a number of years ago, and then kind of returned to the game when semi-professionalism was taking off, back with the Brisbane Heat, I suppose, when the WBBL started, but the Queensland Fire as well. And one thing led to another. And by 2017, after that disastrous World Cup campaign for Australia, they're like, what about that really dependable all-rounder who used to be an opening bowler 10 years ago? Let's give her a go again. And she ended up winning a couple of World Cups. The performance...
3, I think.
3, was it? Okay. Certainly in 2018, it stands out to me that she was an outstanding contributor from the very start of that competition in the Caribbean all the way through to the final. One of the best fielders in the team as well. Won a couple of Ashes series in 2017 and 2019, and yes, retires at age 32, I think it is. But what a fantastic contribution across a long period of time in the game. And one of the more interesting careers, I suppose, because she had that career break in her 20s before coming back to it, because there was a career to be had, which there wasn't necessarily before.
Yeah, Delissa Kimmins, also one of but probably the cricketer who sounds most like a kind of cake, in some way. Every time that came, just like a brand of cake. I thought if you were making cakes, that's what you'd want to name them. A Delissa Kimmins, a Kimmins pie, maybe something like that. Anyway, she didn't bowl pies. She bowled really nicely. One of those kind of Sarah Ailey style, you don't know why she's so hard to hit, but she's really hard to hit. And everybody thought that they could hit her and nobody could. And that was pretty much the story of her career.
Well, I like that the way that you look at it, the longer lens of her career. In 2008, she was a fast bowler in context. She was one of the faster Australian bowlers. That's what she did. And now, obviously we followed the second half of her career very closely. She is not a fast bowler. She's a clever, cagey, medium pacer. A fast bowler is Darcy Brown, who is coming through and has got herself a contract. So they made the Kimmins announcement when relaying who the 15 nationally contracted players would be for the next 12 months. And so Darcy Brown, it's almost reflective of a changing of the guard as far as the sorts of cricketers who are now getting these opportunities to play for Australia in the next generation. Yeah, and I think that's quite nice. So Kimmins, who was a fast bowler, is bowing out as a bowling all-rounder, and she's essentially been overtaken by Darcy Brown, who has the world at her feet.
Yeah, Darcy Brown, 17, just got on her first tour a few weeks ago. I do think it's a bit rude to Molly Strano, who's always called in. She hasn't got a contract, and she's always called in as the replacement. She's never in the squad, but then someone gets injured, and they go, oh, actually, Molly, parachute into the 11 and do a job for us, be dependable, and she is. And they're like, okay, cool, see you later. See you next time.
But I guess it's hard because you look at the 15 contracted players. Georgia Wareham, Jess Jonathan, Ash Gardner, Sophie Molyneux. Those four spinners pick themselves. You can only have so many spinners in that 15. I suppose in the case of Molyneux and Gardner especially, they're more all-round options. But still, that might be why Strano finds it hard to get herself a deal.
Yep. Alex Doolan has gone as well. The man they named Dools. Good nickname work there, Australia. Really nailed that one. Following the Chad is great and Callum Ferguson as test players who disappeared out the door. One of those, long career, 35 years old by the time he called it a day. Had his moment in South Africa in the baggy green, being a first drop. It's not a very easy job, but he tried it. He gave it a go, and they can never take that away from him.
Yeah, and made nearly 6,000 runs for Tasmania, so the 8th most for the state in Shield cricket. The 89 on debut was 11 runs away from being part of that very special club of centuries at the first time of asking there at the second innings at Centurion. He made it through to a second tour. I forgot about this bit, Geoff, but he played the 3 tests in South Africa and then was also there at Dubai Sports City in 2014 before he eventually made way. But yeah, he had a couple of lean seasons after that Australian experience. Bounced back magnificently towards the end of his career with a massive double century against Victoria on the G in 2017. Made twin tons just last season, so he was still a valuable contributor for Tasmania, part of their Shield success a decade ago as well. But yeah, interesting that he said he was at peace with it all and had made the decision at Christmas even. He sort of realised that at age 35 that the time was right for generational change at Hobart, and he was happy to make way and move to the next phase of his life. But yes, a baggy green and earned that as well, because the couple of years before it, he was one of the most attractive players in Australia and had his opportunity.
Now, the county cricket over in England, you missed out on another hat-trick, Adam. I've got to say, I was excited when I saw the scorecard. I saw things coming up on the internet. They said hat-trick. They had said a bus. They said Middlesex. I was like, hang on. Those are the games you're doing. You must have been there. You weren't there.
No, I'm not doing away games, so my streak continues. I often get messages around one-day international hat-tricks, and I'm like, no, that's not a problem. I've actually commentated a couple of those. It's red ball, first class or test. I've never seen one, and circumstances have conspired against me again this week because I wasn't at Hampshire, not doing away games for Middlesex. Mohammed Abbas, though, what an amazing performance. 9 for 37 from 36 overs for the match, including 6 for 11 from 11 in the first innings. He had his 5-wicket bag, 5 for 3 at one stage after 17 deliveries, which is just crazy. Completely decimated Middlesex, who they ended up beating quite comfortably. Later in that that game, Geoff, Ian Holland made a pretty important contribution as well. So Ian Holland, I suppose, relates to what we were saying before about USA cricket, but from an Australian perspective, people might remember him as having won Australian cricket superstar back on Foxtel in 2012, got himself a Victorian deal out of that reality television show, was on the books for a couple of years, played one Shield game, moved to the UK to play initially club cricket, got picked up by Hampshire because he's got a UK passport, so he's able to play here on the back of that. But he's also got an American passport because that's where he was born, and thus he's currently a USA international because they're playing one days right now as part of that second tier of the one day. What are they calling it? The One Day Super League. He's in the division below that, but it's got one day international status. Anyway, for Hampshire this week, made 64 and 146 not out opening, then picked up 3 for 19 with the ball. So, Geoff, he feels to me as though someone we desperately need to get on the final word. I interviewed him last year for a column, and his story is one of the best going around at the moment.
I think that he should start a podcast himself with Johan Wagner, the guy
so
who got
niche.
picked up for Port Adelaide after winning The Recruit,
Yes.
which was the same TV show but for Australian rules football. You know, they'd have some stories. You know, they could. I don't know who they'd interview, but the two of them together, sparks would fly. It'd work.
I think it would. I loved that Recruit show. Certainly the first season, it had me hooked. I think for the time being, though, Ian Holland, I'm sure they call him Dutchie, even if he doesn't want to be called Dutchie. It being Australian cricket, if your last name is Holland, you need to be called Dutchie. Ian Dutchie Holland, he'll have to settle with the CBUS Super Performer of the Week award, which I think is right to go his way. You need to know when to declare and retire the way you want. Visit cbussuper.com.au to find out how, or better still, cbussuper.com.au/the final word and get some information about sorting out your super. Ian Holland, I think he's 31 now, so he won't be retiring anytime soon, especially now that he's got this opportunity to be an international cricketer. So maybe he'll hang on until 2028 and play at the Olympic Games for America in Los Angeles when he's, I suppose he'd be 38 or 39.
Like Anderson Cummins, was it, who came back and played for Canada? There are opportunities there if you want them. So he'd be a UK, American, Australian nicknamed Dutchie. Good work, Australia. There was also, speaking of disappointments, the Bannerman that didn't quite happen. We talked about this. We talked about this on Storytime, I think, when we were recording just before it would have been relevant, where you had a team 8 wickets down, and as long as the 2 more wickets fell without another run being added, then Scotty Borthwick, was it, would have got a Bannerman. It would have Bannermaned for 100 that he'd made earlier, but that didn't happen. They ruined it.
It was tantalising, wasn't it? At stumps, he'd made 100 batting at number 3 out of 8 for 148. They needed to lose both wickets on 148 on the second morning, but it edged through the slips and it ran away. In the end, they added about 100 odd for the last 2 wickets and took a healthy first innings lead against Essex at Chelmsford, a lead of 163. And they still lost. Essex won by 44 runs, the champions. They know how to fight back, much as it was with Somerset at Lords last week against Middlesex, a healthy first innings deficit, but got the job done. Simon Harmer, Geoff, you won't be surprised to hear, another 10-wicket match. He's a freak, that bloke. Speaking of freakish spinners, Matt Parkinson, I'm sure you would have seen his ball of the century, as everyone tweeted it simultaneously, a contender at Old Trafford, bowling Adam Rossington on Friday afternoon. I quite like the fact that Simon Kerrigan, his old teammate from Lancs, who now, of course, plays at Northants, was watching from the non-strikers end, and he kind of threw his hands in the air like, what are we meant to do with that? But yes, the leg spinner Parkinson, who spent all winter watching England play from inside the bubble but never getting an opportunity, has, he's gone viral.
Yep, James Bracey as well, who I've heard people starting to talk about as coming in for England. As though is this in a non-folks? Is Ben Folks now persona non grata because of India, or is he injured?
No, I think this is James Bracey, specialist bat chat. I've heard about
him as backup keeper, like the keeper who would play if Butler's in the IPL sort of thing.
Yeah,
he's
certainly a wicket keeper. He keeps for Gloucestershire, and they beat Somerset in the derby. No mean feat, an away game as well. He made 118 and 83 to lead Gloucestershire to victory. But yeah, I think that he's reached that stage where yes, he's the sub-keeper, so to speak, but he might be in contention for a specialist batting spot if I suppose, if injuries broke his way, as it were. But he'll need to get past players like Ollie Pope, who for Surrey made 245 against Leicestershire out of Surrey's. I think it was 672 for 5 declared, so a road there at the Oval. But it's amazing to think that Pope, when he goes back to that next level down, he's now got 3 double tons for Surrey and averages in excess of 70 for his county. So you can see why he was put on the fast track a couple of years ago. They didn't have enough time to win the game against Leicestershire, though. They fell about 5 or 6 wickets short, with Leicestershire doing well in the second innings. Looking at Surrey in terms of the other England performances in their one innings, Rory Burns made 36 and Ben Foakes backed up his century in round 1 with 87, so he started the campaign well. Joe Root made 100 as well for Yorkshire. He probably needed that. He had started slowly for Yorkshire and got himself a second innings 100 against Kent. Adam Lyth, the name you probably haven't thought of for a while, Geoff, made 97 and 116 in that game. He's only 33. He looks like he's 53. But
he looked like he was 53 when he was playing. And that was he playing in 2013 or 15?
15. So he played the 7 test of that summer. But he should.
Feels like a long time ago. It feels like a very long time ago that I was watching Adam Lyth bat.
Well, that's why I checked his age.
Adam Lyth was part of my world.
Yeah, well, I saw all their scores. I wonder how old he actually is, thinking he might be 36 or 37, but 33, so not completely out of contention. We nearly had some history, and this was brought to my attention by Chris Arkle on the Patreon page in the Glamorgan-Sussex games. 18 LBWs, which is 2 away from the record, and that was out of 32 wickets in the match. So eventually, Sussex won 2 down in the 4th innings. They chased down what they were set about 160 odd. But at one stage, we're thinking, well, 8 wickets to go, already 18 leg befores. They're a decent chance here of going through that record, which I think a couple of teams have taken 20 leg befores in a game, but a stack of them were Ollie Robinson. Watch this space here. He took 9 for 78 for Sussex in the second innings against Glamorgan. He was in the England bubble last year. He probably would have played if they ever had an injury in that stretch of time. He was sort of next cab off the rank kind of thing. Tall, accurate, not express paced. You know, we're talking 130, 135 in kilometres, 80 odd mile an hour, but he gets fantastic bounce from his 6'7" frame. He's kind of an angry dude as well. I saw him last year when he played against Middlesex and the way he carried on. I think they might like that, I reckon, as far as a sort of competitor to bring to Australia later in the year. So they got the points despite the fact that Kieran Carlson made twin tons for Glamorgan, the 22-year-old Welshman. Always like it when we see young Welsh cricketers doing well. There were some great pictures at the end of the Derbyshire-Worcestershire game with 9 fielders around the bat. They ended up falling 2 wickets short. I did put in a polite inquiry to the ECB to ask whether that might have been to do with the fact that they lost 80 minutes for the Prince Philip funeral on Saturday. By 80 minutes, I mean they took an 80-minute tea break, but apparently, notwithstanding the chat on Twitter, they did make up all the overs in that game. So Prince Philip didn't contribute to Derbyshire not getting the last 2. But we always love seeing men around the bat with, wickets to get, men on their knees around the bat waiting for any opportunity.
Yes, just the quiet funeral. I liked seeing those reports where that wanted a low-key funeral, and then there were all these shots of hundreds of soldiers marching in formation in a big castle, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm just having a quiet night, just having a quiet fast forward. Hey. To give you an insight, people, into how we make this show, I woke up to several text messages from Adam the other morning with that information about the 18 LBWs so far in the match, 9 wickets to go. The first class record is 20. That was the first thing in the morning. I was like, all right, good. I'm glad you're having fun.
I think you actually, from memory, you might have picked that up when you were having a big night yourself at a wedding. So it was something you were able to track.
Maybe I was still awake. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I probably was just before I saw it twice. I saw it before I went to bed and afterwards, and I was just as surprised to see it the second time.
In that Warwickshire-Derbyshire game, Matt Critchley, he's very much a man that's being talked about around county circles at the moment, made 109 and 84 and also 8 wickets in the match. He started the season brilliantly. And last but not least, Warwickshire chased down 333 to beat Notts. Stuart Broad was in that attack for Notts, so no mean feat. He took 5 wickets in the game, Broad. But Tim Bresnan, now a Warwickshire player, 68 not out in the chase, got the job done. Thought you'd like that.
How many counties has he played for? It seems like most of them.
No, just the two, but it's more the fact that he's having this sort of late career.
He's still going around.
He's probably 35 now, and as much a batsman as he was a bowler in the latter part of his career. So that's the wrap of the county round. We haven't quite worked out how we're going to do county cricket week in, week out. We had a couple of notes in the Patreon inbox last week asking whether we would give it as much attention as we have the Shield, but we might just pull out these nuggets.
No,
once.
Because there are 6 Shield teams and there are 18 county teams.
Yeah,
so
it's not
frankly,
quite. It's not quite possible to go into that level of depth, but we might do as we have here and pull out a few highlights from each game through the week. And on that note, we'll pause, Geoff. We'll take a couple of minutes to discuss a magazine that we love ever so much. And after that, we'll be back with South African cricket commentator and journalist Neil Manthorp.
Hi, my name's Kate Cross, and you're listening to The Final Word with Adam and Geoff.
Once a month, it happens. A monthly magazine is released. More than one monthly magazine. A range of monthly magazines are released once a month if they indeed live up to their name. But this particular one is the one we're interested in. It is the Wisden Cricket Monthly. And it is leading off. Its cover story is all about somebody who a lot of people in England have been excited about a lot in recent times. He had a couple of comical moments in the recent England-India test matches. His name is Daniel Lawrence. He can probably do more things aside from being funny on the cricket field. There are times when he does things that are good as well, I'm told. And he chatted to Phil Walker, the editor, about exactly that, Adam.
Yeah, it's a great piece. Phil sent it to me the other day to have a look at. So he spent a couple of days with Dan at Essex during what must have been their round 1 match, I reckon, and some great photos which they set up there in front of the gates there at Essex, and great, fantastic, striking cover with him holding 2 cricket bats over his shoulder. And yeah, it's a moment in time piece. It's a piece that I suppose we'll reflect upon when he gets more opportunities for England, but it looks at what he was able to achieve there on his test debut in Sri Lanka, and then at the very end of the tour in the final test match where he made, I think, twin 50s, wasn't it, in the 4th test against India. And it includes some commentary from Tom Wesley, who kind of crashes the interview. So Phil's talking with Dan, and in walks his captain, and I think he's his housemate, isn't it? Tom Wesley walks in and starts telling Phil how great Lawrence is, and Phil captures him beautifully. Indeed, the other day we were playing football, as we do on a Friday night, a few of us, and Phil was after that watching Lawrence bat in the second innings for Essex in their game against Durham, and he was sort of so invested in it. You know how at the top of the show I talked about the way that you and I watch Maxi? That's Phil with Dan Lawrence. So nice to observe that, having read the article a couple of days ago. So that's off the front as the cover this month.
Yep, and then it's the big county cricket section as well. There's a new section that they put in called the County Files. It will cover all 18 counties. So if you're a person who is sending us messages saying we need to cover all 18 counties, no, we don't, because it's in Wisden Cricket Monthly. They've already done it. There is no point going over the same ground twice. Exclusive interviews in the section this month with Scott Borthwick, who we were just talking about, the near bannerman, Hassan Azad, who's opening the batting for Leicestershire. Mark Robinson, the Warwickshire coach. Robbo coming back to the domestic circuit after running the England women's team very successfully for a number of years, and a whole lot more.
I saw Robbo during the winter. He lives in the street next to Rachel's parents. I saw him having a run one day. I'm like, "G'day, Robbo. How's it going?" Good. Off the coach.
He's like, "Are you following me?"
Good.
Goes,
off the coach Warwickshire.
I went outside, and that Adam Collins was out there. He won't leave me alone. He's a very nice man, Mark Robinson.
He is. I forgot to mention, by the way, when talking about Dan Lawrence, that he talks about Virat Kohli and he dips into some grade cricketer speak. He describes him as the biggest alpha you've ever seen in your life. So nice that podcasting from Australia is starting to penetrate the mainframe over here on the county circuit. And yes, so that county section in the magazine is going to be a big part of it through the course of the summer. Chris Broad is in there talking about his colourful career in the game. That'll be worth reading, I reckon, because, Chris Broad has done, an Ashes winning batter who made 3 centuries in the 86-87 series, but also a rebel tourist, and then a distinguished match referee, and also the father of Stuart. So, kind of a complicated and rich life in the game. So I'm looking forward to reading that interview.
The man without whom the song "He's Big, He's Bad, He's Better Than His Dad," Stuart Broad, would not either be possible because of the existence of Stuart, but also would not make any sense because his dad, you had to know who his dad was. I suppose you could say it about, most cricketers were better than their dads, except maybe Arjun Tendulkar and a couple of others. But yeah, that's very important. Suresh Menon's in there, which is important. The great Indian writer interviewing Anil Kumble, who's a bowling legend with a writing legend. Muhammad Amir talking to Saj Sadiq about his decision to retire, and the usual stable of columnists: Lizzie Ammon, Izzy Westbury, Andy Miller, Andy Zaltzman. I just decided to abbreviate everyone's names there. You can't abbreviate the name Adam. You can't do it. So for Adam Collins, I just have to say Adsy. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing you get as a kid, isn't it? Ads or Adsy, but it never really stuck. Thankfully, the far more original Colo was the prevailing nickname at school. Or
as I like to call you with the assistance of the accreditation department in South Africa, Colin Adams. So look, that's the magazine. The important thing is that you can subscribe to it very cheaply. It's like 10 quid or about 15 Australian dollars. When you subscribe to the digital edition, you can get that at that sweet discount by using the link which is in our show notes, bit.ly/WCMTFW. Don't bother remembering that. It's in the little notes under the episode. Click the link. The discount's built in. Go and get it. It's good.
And that's not just for one edition, by the way. That's for 6 editions, a half a year subscription just for 15 Australian dollars or 10 quid. It's the best cricket magazine in the world, and I use the iPad version now, and it's really, really good. They've made a lot of improvements on that app in the last couple of years. So if you're on the fence and you don't really fancy reading a magazine in digital form, I assure you this is a good user experience. bit.ly/WCMTFW. Get that sweet discount. The best cricket mag in the world, Wisden Cricket Monthly.
Hi, I'm Ian Chappell. You're listening to The Final Word with Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon.
Neil Manthorp, we like to check in with you about news in South Africa, which has not been great on the whole over the last year or so. The short version, the Cliff Notes version is we've got the South African Cricket Members Council, that's the head of the provincial organisations, largely ceremonial in theory. Then we had the board, which was about half made up of members of the Members Council as well. But the other members of the Members Council voted to sack the board, even though the ones who were on the board didn't. Then we had an interim board, which the Members Council was supposed to institute as a more permanent body with some changes, and they're refusing to do it, and shit has hit the fan. Can you first tell us what the hell is going on? Try to give us a picture of what's happened in the last few days.
So they implemented one or two of the smaller, less significant recommendations, but didn't do any of the big stuff. And it's come back to bite them once again. So the current sports minister, Nathi Mthethwa, appointed the interim board in October last year in order to implement the changes that should have been made over 10 years ago. They've come up with a draft memorandum of incorporation in which there will be a majority independent board chaired by an independent director, much as is the case in England, New Zealand, Australia, and now even India. So the board, the Members' Council, however, and that comprises the presidents of the 14 provincial unions. And just to rewind here, to give you an example of what they've done and what they stand to lose, one of the recommendations of the Nicholson report back in 2011 was that there should be a small payment for directors as a recognition of the fact that the amateur days of sports administration, cricket administration were over. They needed, he said, independent professional directors with skills that were suitable to run the game of cricket, and they should be compensated for their time. An independent remunerations company, and I didn't know they existed, but there are companies whose sole purpose is to tell other companies how much they should pay their employees. Now, they recommended 96,000 Rand a year, which isn't much, divided by whatever your currency is, 20 in the case of the pound. So it's not much. It's £4,500 a year. So basically just over £1,000 for 4 meetings per year. And that was to cover, preparation time, reading time, and just to as a recognition that the directors were professionals.
A gesture almost.
But not so much in South Africa. Bear in mind that a beer still only costs 10 Rand here. But in the intervening 10 years, the Members' Council voted to increase that 96,000 a year to closer to 420,000, which is a significant amount of money, let me tell you. And so many of the provincial presidents, the Members' Council, don't want to give up not just the prestige and the power. They certainly play a role, but it's the cash and the perks as well.
Right. So they're very keen to hang on to their own positions as members of the board because they're presumably not being paid to be on the members' council, but they are being paid to be on the board.
Yeah, but there's perks and privileges that come with for the members' council members who aren't on the board. So you can see the problem. You have a board of directors which is overseen by the members' council as the highest decision-making body in Cricket South Africa. The members' council, they oversee the board, but the majority of the board is also on the members' council. So they're judge and jury.
Yeah, a slight conflict of interest, one might say. But what's been going on in the last week or so has basically been that the sports minister is threatening to withdraw Cricket South Africa's ability to put out a team that claims to be representing South Africa. Is that more or less what's going on?
That's right, yeah. He will intervene. He can do two things by law. One is withdraw funding, and that's completely inconsequential because it's less than R1 million a year, and it's R1 billion industry. So that's inconsequential. But as you say, he can withdraw the awarding of official colours. In other words, the national team will no longer be representing South Africa. And that obviously constitutes government intervention in the running of the sport. But as I understand it, and this is really interesting, as I understand it, the ICC can't be proactive in suspending an affiliate or an associate for government intervention. They can't say, we don't like the look of what's going on there. They have to be reactive. In other words, Cricket South Africa in this case, or Zimbabwe cricket as it was 18 months ago when they were suspended, they have to say to the ICC, we are being interfered with.
Right.
So the members' council, in effect, will have to go to the ICC and say, the government is intervening in the running of our sport. Then the ICC have to make a decision.
But then that decision can be to ban South Africa from competing. So why would the members' council have any incentive to make that complaint as opposed to just continuing to try to push through and say, oh, well, we're the South African team. We don't care if you recognise us or not.
You see the problem. You've spotted the car crash before it actually happens, Geoff. It's going to be really interesting to see what the members' council do. At the moment, they have shown scant regard for the players and the health and safety and well-being of South African cricket. So it may well be that they decide to call the minister's bluff and appeal to the ICC and say that the minister has interfered in the administration and the running of the game. Therefore, you have to suspend us. Yeah, I mean, Cricket South Africa wouldn't be banned. The Proteas, the national teams, wouldn't be banned as such. That implies, long term or in perpetuity. But the CSA's membership of the ICC could be suspended until the impasse is broken. But you know what? I mean, the men's team is supposed to go to the West Indies in June, Ireland for six games in July, Sri Lanka in August. They're supposed to go to India just before the T20 World Cup for another white ball series there. They've got a lot of cricket coming up. And then, of course, there's a T20 World Cup in November. And then South Africa are suspended for even 3 months, but 6 months, and it would be immediate bankruptcy. Because the other thing is, sponsorship revenue would dry up immediately, and that's at an all-time low because of all of the maladministration and the lack of governance. But television revenue, and here's the thing, and I've spoken to the broadcasters, they all say, of course we wouldn't be interested in televising unofficial internationals. Contractually, Cricket South Africa are bound to provide X number of international matches, and they have to be official. Right. You can't say, listen, we're still going to play India, but they're going to be friendlies. Are you interested in broadcasting them?
Or maybe you just have to bring in other teams. We'll have India play Sri Lanka in South Africa, and you can telecast that. So, how is it that the people on the members' council who've created this impasse? How is it that they're kind of how vulnerable are they to being replaced? What recourse is there for anyone to try to get rid of them via other means, or are they impervious? Well,
I mean, see, they're all elected by their provinces for a 4 or 5 year term. So eventually those terms will run out. But what's happened in South African cricket for decades and decades is that the nepotism and cronyism and provincial bias, obviously, that exists at domestic level means that more often than not, it's a like-for-like replacement, occasionally handpicked by the outgoing president. So we're not talking about a few bad apples. We're not talking about a bad crop at this particular time in South African cricket. We're talking about a rotten tree that needs to be cut down and another one planted.
And where do you think this might go? I mean, it feels like a game of chicken at the moment. The Members' Council they've gone past the initial deadline for them to sort something out that the Sports Minister gave them. But, you know, how far can it go and how much damage can be done?
Well, I thought that we reached the end of the road at least 6 times in the last couple of years. But as I said, the tree needs to be cut down. And if that means, I can't believe I'm going to say it, but I mean, if that means Cricket South Africa being suspended as an affiliate member of the ICC, then if that's the only way to get rid of the Members' Council and to create a new structure, then I'm at that point now. I feel desperately sorry for the players, the men and women who make a living out of the game, and whose career and would be affected, desperately badly affected. But it is a game of chicken. You're absolutely right. Now, the Members' Council issued a statement this morning. So you've got the interim board issuing statements and then the Members' Council issuing counter statements. The Members' Council issued a statement this morning which had one tiny glimmer of hope in it. They said, we do not believe the situation is unresolvable. But they then went on to give about 15 examples of exactly why it would be unresolvable. But I think that, the minister has said that he's going to go ahead and intervene and, clear the decks and restructure cricket as much as the law will allow him to do. He also said that he would start that process next week. So we have another week of everyone sitting on tenterhooks and just worrying about the future. I'm brushing up on my rugby skills because the Lions are coming here, and I think I might be in for a career change.
I have to jump sports. And then the other deeply sad story that came out just north of you in Zimbabwe, Heath Streak being banned for 8 years for enabling corruption, match fixing while being a coach, which just seems an extraordinary sort of thing given that he was supposedly one of the few people of integrity in Zimbabwe cricket through that period when they were competitive, when he was the kind of spiritual leader of that team almost. It felt desperately sad that he was the person who was involved with this sort of thing. It
was a desperate shock, absolutely desperate shock. I am close to Heath. I've spent a lot of time with him when he was Zimbabwe national coach. I was helping out in the media department there, and I spent a lot of time with him. Well, I find it quite difficult to talk about, and I've turned down a number of requests for interviews and chats and that kind of thing. All I would say, 2 things, is that he remains a kind and empathetic and generous person. And the second is that he has admitted the offences. I find it really hard to stomach that he attempted to get rid of evidence, destroying SIM cards and wiping his phone and initially denying everything. But I can tell you the ICC have known about it, or the ICC's anti-corruption unit have known about it for years. And going way back to the beginning of 2019, which is when I first heard the first rumours. So, he has admitted the offence. He's always liked a bit of cash. He's always had a weakness. It reminds me of Hansi Cronje and his self-confessed love of money. Now there were reasons. I mean, him and his father run an enormous game farm just outside of Bulawayo with enormous costs. And let me just tell you, Heath has not been coaching for the love of it. He's needed the income, I can assure you. And so an 8-year ban, it's going to have enormous repercussions and consequences for him, his father Dennis, the family, all their staff, their workers. I mean, he has made a catastrophic mistake, and he's going to pay immensely for it. And he knew the consequences. I mean, he coached in the Afghanistan Premier League, the Indian Premier League, the Bangladesh Premier League. He's been through umpteen hundred safety and security and corruption, anti-corruption briefings. He knew the consequences. He knew the risks that he was taking, and he's going to have to live with that.
Thank you for talking to us about it. It's obviously very emotional.
Well, yeah, it is. But you know what? We all support the system, don't we? I mean, I can't imagine that anybody in this room thinks that being banned for taking part in any aspect of corruption is a bad thing. And can I just say one other thing as well? A few people have said to me, he never actually fixed a game. He never actually fixed a game, as if that's somehow a lesser crime. It's like saying, I didn't shoot him. Okay, I hired the guy who did, but I didn't shoot him. Well, I mean, we hiring a killer's. Maybe that's an unfair analogy. I think it probably is inappropriate analogy. But you know what I mean? As you said, you used the word enabling right at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, the position of responsibility, and then potentially, leading people who are younger and stupider and more vulnerable to do things that are going to damage their lives as well. Yeah,
and if just one young player is able to recover from the inspiration, the loss of inspiration that Streak provided, and is able to learn and be scared, knowledgeably scared about the consequences of getting involved in the nefarious world of underground betting, then some good will have come of it. But at the moment, it doesn't feel like much good's come of it, but it's the right thing.
Yeah, it never does. Neil, I know you've got to run, but thank you very much for joining us again on The Final Word.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Isha Gua, and you're listening to The Final Word with Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon.
It's The Final Word, Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon. Thank you to Neil Manthorp for his quite remarkable insight, not just on South African cricket. And I should say, his blog is so good at the moment. Manners on Cricket. Please subscribe to it if you want to keep abreast of what's going on over there. They're not like long essay length bits either. When something happens, he drops a note out there and keeps you across it. We might put a link to Manners on Cricket in the show notes this week. And also, on Heath Streak, I knew that he was friends with him, but I didn't realise that there was that sort of far deeper connection. So thanks for Manners for being willing to share that with us. And Geoff, from very heavy terrain to far lighter, time for a little bit of
Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge, the game that you all know how to play, everybody who's watching this show, because you're all on the Patreon page. This is how it works. You are nice people, and so you help us make the show by financially contributing, but doing so not with a normal amount of currency, but with a very specific amount of currency. And you know that it means something about cricket, that number, but we don't know what it means until we do know what it means. We have to work out what it means. This is the challenge. This is the sleuthing that happens. So to give you an example, for instance, you might be a person named Sam Nemzer, and you might decide to send us at the show $6.09, 609. And then we would have to think, what does 609 mean in a cricketing context? And as it happens, that example is exactly what has happened this week, because 609 is the number that Sam has sent to you, Adam. And what do you think it means?
Right. So, Geoff, you know that I'm into. I was going to say, I'm into mirroring. That might give a certain impression. I'm into events mirroring each other in the great game of cricket. As Michael Clark would say,
our great game of cricket. If somebody asked me, I would consider if the right person were to ask me, I would consider my answer.
So because of that, I'm going to skip over the story I was going to tell you about James Foster, the great Essex stumper who played 7 test matches between 2001, 2002, the best keeper of his generation.
And got out LBW to Steve Waugh at the MCG in like 2000.
Good knowledge. Also caught Steve Waugh off Steve Harmison, but didn't appeal in that crazy fourth innings on the final day.
Yeah.
So he was the 609th English Test cricketer. That's why I could have told you about him. But instead, I'm going to initially start with two ball draws. So this is when the score was made. 609's been made twice in Test cricket. Once by India against Zimbabwe in Nagpur in 2000 in 156 painstaking overs. And once
Heath Streak was playing in that game.
He almost certainly was. And once by New Zealand against the West Indies in Dunedin in 2013. In both cases, the innings were declared. They went big. Roscoe Taylor made a double ton in one, and Sachin Tendulkar made a double in the other. What I like about this is that in both instances, the opposition, Zimbabwe and West Indies, had to follow on. And in both cases, they made almost exactly the same score. They made 503 and 507 when following on in the third innings of those two matches. So yuck games, and they both end up being draws, but nice and close on both fronts. Figures, though, bowling figures. 2004 in Mumbai.
Oh.
There's the pup. There's the pup.
I didn't even think of this. Did I just channel that from the number without consciously having?
Well, that's why. I said it to begin with, a great game of cricket, knowing that we were going to talk about Michael Clarke,
right.
and then you took it and ran with it and did it well.
Yeah.
But he took 6 for 9 from 6.2 overs in the Mumbai Test of 04. Australia were eventually set 107 and were all out for 93 on a dust bowl, a thriller, a 2-day test match, I reckon it might have been as well. They were his first test wickets. He only took 25 further wickets in 111 further matches over the course of 11 more years. And that also mirrors the other 6 for 9 taken in international cricket, that by Gargi Banerjee, who was an Indian seamer, who took 6 for 9 against New Zealand in a test match in 1985 at Cuttack in the space of 9.4 overs. But she only took 2 further test wickets in 6 more test matches, and for 8 all up. So of her 8 test wickets, 6 came in one burst. And with Clarke, it was 6 out of 31. But yeah, I like the fact that the 2 times that analysis has been recorded in test match cricket, it's been from bowlers who didn't do an awful lot apart from their one day in the sun. So we've got the 609s, which marry up with a 503 and a 507 following on. And then we've got the 2 6 for 9s, which are from Michael Clarke and from Gargi Banerjee, the Indian seamer, who really only had that one day. And that's my offering for 609.
I like it. I happen to know for reasons that Michael Clarke's career bowling average was about 38.5 by the end. So after that first bowling innings, averaging 1.5 runs per wicket, and then blew it out to 38. Wasted opportunity. The other number, with the second number, we're doing 2 numbers. This is how it works. Joseph Brookshaw, very generously, has dropped in $18.84. Maybe they're pounds, because I think Joseph has an English relationship. 18.84. Nonetheless. And thank you, Joseph. And there is a clue that comes with this that says the decimal point separates 2 unrelated-ish numbers, although the numbers are related to the same player. So the previous player that we talked about in relation to a Joseph Brookshaw clue was Stephen Harmison, who does, as it happens, if we're looking for 18 and 84 being 2 different numbers, Steve Harmison has a highest one-day batting score of 18 and a T20 international batting strike rate of 84. How do you like them apples? He also took 184 list day wickets. 184 is a number that contains both 18 and 84 together at last. But I don't think it's that.
Nor do I.
There was I did then wonder, had anyone made 18 from 84 balls in international cricket? Yes, they have. MJK Smith, the England captain, who I kind of didn't really know existed until I looked him up a few months ago, because I hadn't heard much about him at all, made that in Auckland. Geoff Miller, future England selector, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Made that in Sydney in 79, and Aravinda De Silva at the MCG in 95. They all made 18 from 84 balls in a test match. Nobody has made it in a one-day international or T20 international cricket, thankfully for them, because if they had, they should have been fired immediately. 18 from 84 balls. So That's not related to... Joseph also said we may be able to get this with the previous clue he gave last month. But looking back through the messages, there's no clue. But there is a message where he's saying that he liked our Dean Jones show because it made him think about Kevin Peterson and their relationships with authority, I suppose. So I thought, could it be a Dean Jones or a Kevin Peterson link? Dean Jones debuted in 1984. We're looking for 18s and 84s. And he did have a real thing about the 18th over of a T20 match. He always used to bang on about how if you win the 18th over, you win the game. That's the crux. It's the 18th over. That's what it's all about. So 84 and 18, two numbers unrelated to each other but related to the same person with Dean Jones, maybe. Or could it relate to Kevin Peterson? Well, all right, let's have a look at this. Kevin Peterson, we need 18 and we need 84. Kevin Peterson batted 181 times in Test cricket, making 8,181 runs. That sequence going 1-8-1-8-1-8-1. There's no 84 in there, but there's a lot of 18s. As for an 84, when he made the century at the Oval in 2005, the score was 158. Don't worry about that. But 18 and 84, 1-8-8-4, he made it off 187 balls, meaning it was a strike rate of 84. You see? See what I mean? You with me? Probably none of those things are the answer. However, you can let me know, Joseph. If I'm anywhere vaguely near the truth, you can drop me a message and nudge me closer to the golden light of realisation. And that is how we play Nerd Pledge.
Fantastic. Well, I think you've done well there. And Joseph, for that generous contribution, that is very much appreciated. Patreon.com/the final word. As we said, we've got a number of our patrons chatting away in the Zoom box right now, which is kind of cool. I see here that Glenn Finkeld has observed that Kieran Carlson, who made the twin centuries for Glamorgan on the weekend, the 22-year-old, the Welshman I referred to, played for Hampton Cricket Club last season in Melbourne. So nice connection there with him there. So we'll keep an eye on him. He'll become a final word favourite, I reckon. And there's also some chat around the Gabba being demolished. Geoff, that was good news today, not just because the Gabba needs demolishing, but because it's going to be rebuilt, a massive rebuild, a huge rebuild for the Olympic Games in 2032. So, I mean, we're talking about the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles, the cycle after that. I'm not sure if has it been confirmed that Brisbane are hosting those Olympics?
No, they're bidding for it.
Yeah, but it's a fait accompli because no other bidder.
Bidding for it.
So in all probability, well, it may very well be the case that cricket gets that ramp up from the 2028 Games in LA, is the exhibition sport, and then gets formally invited to join in Australia at Brisbane. It'd be kind of cool.
Tim Payne should be the ambassador for the campaign. You know, I can't wait to get you to the Gabba. Everybody, welcome in 2032. Can't wait to see you all there. That's the way to do it.
Unfortunately, it wouldn't be at the Gabba because I'd imagine that they're putting a big investment in there in order to make it the stadium, right? I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be the Olympic Stadium, and thus they need to find other cricket venues. But they've got now the Allan Border Field and the Ian Healy Field, and that's where the Sheffield Shield final was played this weekend, Geoff. The
Mr. Sheffield
final, yes, the Mr. Sheffield final, Geoff. We were going to be having a conversation with Jack Wildermuth about the Sheffield Shield final today. That hasn't quite come to fruition, but we are going to tell you how Queensland won the game there at AB Field, and we are also going to mention in passing that Fran Drescher, or Fran Fine as her character was known in The Nanny, is on Cameo for 375 quid, I noted over the weekend, which is the very same amount that I paid a scalper before the Lord's Test match of 2005 to get myself in on the first day. That, to me, feels like it has to be something that you and I waste some money on and get Fran to join us on the final word at some point. I can't see any other way.
I think it's also worth pointing out that with inflation, Fran Drescher would actually be significantly cheaper than the amount that you paid in 2005. You know, a real bargain. And so, yeah, look, if we can, mate, this is what Patreon needs to be paying for. This is what our next campaign needs to be about.
Could well
be. We need to collect the money. But, you know, we've got to get her on the show. Some people have been looking for links. We got a message about this just before, actually.
I think it was from Matthew Jones on the public page.
Matthew Jones, was it from you on the public page? Yes. Matthew Jones is in the chat, so here we are.
Yeah. I think I might have dropped it in for story time this weekend, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Let's do it now. What do you say? You got a joke, use it, play it. Spend
it when you get it. Yes, Matthew Jones said He was curious to see whether there are any links between Fran Drescher and cricket that we could use to get her on the show. One link is that she attended Hillcrest High School in Jamaica Hills, Queens, New York, along with Ray Romano, and that Hillcrest High have a boys and a girls cricket team playing in the public schools athletic league. Whether they had that cricket team when Fran Drescher was there is another question, but if they did, maybe she has fond memories of that cricket team and will agree to come on the show on that basis. We'll find out.
I think there's another bit in Matthew's email where he screenshotted from a book where both Fran Drescher and Shane Warne believe in aliens, and and the passages run side by side in the book in question. So,
and tell me, in that case, there is zero possibility that Shane Warne did not hit up Fran Drescher on Instagram at some point and be, hey, I noticed we're both in this book. We should grab a drink. And like about 83 of her historical photos.
Got to be in it to win it, Warnie, as we always see. What was it? It was Margot Robbie last year, wasn't it? Liking and commenting on every photo. Got to be in it to win it. Should we talk about the final? We should. That's a rhetorical question, which I'm going to answer. It was at Allan Borderfield, and Queensland won comprehensively by an innings and 43 runs. New South Wales all out for 143. Curtis Patterson, the stand-in captain, top scored with 43. Sean Abbott, 23, was the second highest scorer. Michael Nemzer started this season with a 5-wicket bag on the first day of the Shield and finishes it with one as well, 5 for 27. And Jack Wildermuth, who we were looking forward to talking to today, but might do in the winter, took 4 for 21. Queensland, in reply, 389 across 149 and a half overs. Marnus Labuschagne, Geoff, 192 from 353. The next highest score in the entire match was 46, which puts that score into perspective. We'll come back to Marnus in a moment. Nathan Lyon and Sean Abbott took 7 wickets between them. And then in the second innings, New South Wales all out for 213. Hughes was the highest score with 40, and Swepson, Bartlett and Doggett picked up 3 wickets each, so it was a real team effort from the 5 Queensland bowlers. And it was all about Marnus Labuschagne, who now has made, I worked out yesterday, 3,959 runs in 2 years since he arrived at Glamorgan 2 years ago. So he's essentially played 3 seasons in that space of time, and he's hit 14 centuries in 38 games at an average of 68.3. And he's obviously on the way back now to play for Glamorgan. He's on the flight probably right now, post-Shield final, to be available next week after quarantine. So, what a run he's on. And judging by those who watched it, he didn't hit a ball in the air and drove New South Wales into the ground.
Yeah, extraordinary performance, really. And I guess you can look at the way that some of the zip went out of that New South Wales attack after such a long summer. Lyon, Hazelwood, Stark doing so much bowling through the test matches, then played a lot of all of the state cricket through the back half, bowled really well in the 50-over final to restrict WA and make sure they won that. But when it came to actual wicket taking, that wasn't really possible, and that AB field deck is very often pretty dead. You obviously wasn't there to assess it, but it's not unusual that it's a bit of a shit heap for bowlers. Yeah,
and it reinforces what a great performance it was from Queensland first up. I mean, there was not a blade of grass on that strip based on the photos we saw on the social media feeds, and the fact that Nemzer and Wildermuth were able to bowl them out in the space of 40-odd overs or whatever it is was quite the effort on that first day. And then doing so again, Swepson, important for him to finish his season with wickets. He'll certainly be part of the conversation next summer. I'm sure that he'll be in the test squad the whole way through alongside Nathan Lyon. And I mean, I doubt they'll play 2 spinners against England, but the very fact that he is asserted himself this year, Geoff, or this Shield season, as very much the next spinner. Like, there's no debating it anymore. There's no other spinner in the country who is being talked up as Lyon's understudy. It is the Queensland leg spinner.
Yeah, that's the case, and that's a body of work over a period of time. But I think what stood out most to me from that game was the sense that it mattered. Like, they had a really good crowd in at AB Field, and they were really into it. And watching, Marnus coming off, giving the big ovation all the way around the ground. He was getting enough applause to deserve that. It wasn't just sort of hurry up and hop off, because they were there. They were living it and loving it. And I guess for Queensland, they had that strange experience when they won the Shield a few years ago, and having Matt Renshaw and Joe Burns pulled out of the celebrations and put on the plane to South Africa pretty much straight after the game, and then everything with how flat that match in Johannesburg was, that would have taken the wind out of the sails a bit. So, yeah, it was sort of nice to see that they were actually able to enjoy one a bit more.
Yeah, I think that's right. We spoke to Matt Renshaw about that on the podcast a couple of years ago, the idea of sort of finishing this important competition. And, yeah, the crowd at AB Field, I think they had a sellout, a COVID-restricted sellout. I think 2,900 people were permitted to go in there, and there were queues outside for the Sheffield Shield. How brilliant's that? And Marnus made some comments after the game that it was the most special ovation he's ever received on a cricket field. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? I mean, so those that debate the merit of the Shield final can refer to that. It means an awful lot to the players. And Geoff, looking back at the season in total now that it's over, yeah, it's finished in mid to late April, and that's unusual. And I don't suppose they'll be doing that again anytime soon. But I think it worked really well. I thought the block of games at the start, given that primacy, and yes, you almost need to do them in Adelaide to have 3 grounds in such close proximity to one another, maybe they'll consider that again. I know that with bubbles as they are, I mean, who knows, they might have to do something like that, but even in a post-COVID environment, if they were able to get the players together and have it almost carnival style for the first month of the season, it certainly drew so much attention to it. I felt like cricket watchers, perhaps passive cricket watchers, were more invested in the Shield, and that continued through to the end of the season, where evidently a lot of people were following it on television and radio through the week.
Yeah. You could easily do it in Sydney as well. They've got about 6 different first-class grounds they could use in Sydney, none of which are famed for, producing much other than a lot of runs, but still, you could do it in Melbourne. One at the G, one at the Juno, and let's bring Shield cricket back to Princes Park. Oh. It hasn't been the same. Get a drop-in wicket at Princes Park. Be still
my beating heart. I think the last time Victoria played at Princes Park, and someone will correct me in the comments, probably Glenn Finkeld, I reckon it was a one-dayer in 1996, and I think Ian Harvey did well. I reckon that's the last time. There was a long time since it's been a cricket ground. Of course, they play next door at Princes Park number 2. But I saw they're pulling down the Hawthorn stand there, which breaks my heart a little bit. It's no longer going to be there, the stand that Hawthorn paid for all those years ago. Anyway, fairly big digression from the Shield final. But it happened. And Queensland are champions for the 9th time since the summer of 94-95, when they finally broke the duck in that competition and asserting themselves as the most dominant team over the last few years, and Labuschagne's reputation continues to be enhanced. The fact that he's coming over here to play a full county season, more or less. I mean, I suppose he'll miss this game. I reckon he'll be good for round 4 if he gets his 5-day test and release, which they're permitted to do. Cost them a bit more money, but I don't think that'll be an issue if they can get him on the park for the 4th game. That means he'll have a lot of 4-day cricket over here, and who's to say he'll be stopped? He's been just extraordinary over the last 2 years.
As a Queenslander, I'm very proud, and just looking forward to kicking back with King Wally Lewis for a 4x off the wood at the Breakfast Creek Hotel. Bannerman time?
Let's finish with a Bannerman, I say. Only because, and I wasn't planning on doing this, but it was a pretty bonkers Bannerman this weekend, wasn't there? We received a note from Matthew Jones and from Colin Bunn. In Colin's case, he had a bit more detail. It was in his local league. They're in Erindale and Wharfdale Senior Cricket League, the 3rd 11 conference, which is
2 of the great Dales, honestly. If you're doing a top 10 of Dales, they're both in there.
I have no idea where Horseforth Hall Park Cricket Club is, nor Oatley Cricket Club, but Oatley were chasing 201, and they were all out for 13 in 8.1 overs. And out of that 13, the opening batter, who is the good mate of my 17-year-old son, says Colin, Jack Brady, made 10 of the 13, Geoff, which, without having done the sums, and I might do it while you're talking, that's very much a Bannerman, isn't it? That's got to hit the mark.
Yeah. That's 10
out of 13 70%. Equals 76.9%. So just this weekend, on Sunday indeed, we saw that happen for the Otley Cricket Club, all out their 3rd 11 for 13 in 8.1 overs. Looking here, it looks like Jack faced 20 deliveries out of the 8.1 overs. He struck 2 boundaries, which naturally were the only 2 boundaries in the innings, because they only added 3 more runs. And there were, in total,
He faced ducks. 20 balls out of 8 overs. So he faced 20 balls out of 48. He really did some work. Gobbled up a fair bit of the strike.
He did.
Protected his teammates.
Unfortunately, he was dismissed. Otherwise, it would have been good for him to have carried the bat. When was he out here?
Yeah.
He was the...
I hope he was first out. That'd be funnier.
I think this might even be better. He was 7th out for 13 when the score for 10 when they were so they didn't score a run after he was dismissed, so it was 13 for 7, 13 for 8, 13 for 9 and all out for 13. So thank you to Colin and to Matthew for bringing that to our attention, and that might be, I reckon, the right place to end this ramshackle edition of The Final Word. I'm not sure it was because we had a studio audience and we were doing it a bit differently than we might normally, but there's been a lot covered. There will be a lot of edits before this goes to air, that's for sure. I'm not sure how the YouTube part of that's going to work, but I wish you well, Ashton, in pulling that together. And as I do, wish you well, DC.
The final version's going to be like 17 minutes long. It's incredible.
Here's the thank yous. I want to thank CBUS Super for having supported us over the last couple of years. I think we started our association with them in May 2019, so nearly 2 full years with the mighty cbussuper.com.au/the final word. Learn more information about your superannuation, get a product disclosure statement from there, and of course you know that past performance isn't a reliable indicator on future performance, as I failed to mention earlier in the show. Thank you to Wisden Cricket Monthly, who have also been with us for a very long period of time. Their new magazine is out on Thursday, the 22nd of April. It is a belter based on what I've seen so far. bit.ly/WCMTFW. Get yourself a cheap subscription, $15 or 10 quid for 6 editions of WCM, the best cricket mag in the world. Bad Producer Productions, Geoff, we are on their label, and it is lovely to be on their label, for they make other great podcasts.
They do. They make other shows. They're about other things. They don't have any other cricket shows. If they signed another cricket show, we would kill them. But we're not jealous. We're not jealous. We just we have limits. We have an understanding.
It's an odd thing when we put out Greatest Season That Was series about cricket, and periodically it's overtaken us on the iTunes charts, and I feel odd about that. I quite like it when Jay Quinnell's it and Bad Producer have got 1 and 2, but it is a bit odd when the other show, which is principally about football, overtakes us on the cricket charts. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
It's a bit like bowling to your brother again, isn't it? You're like, I'm glad to see him doing well. Back we come. Thanks to DC, who edits the show, and Ashton, who also edits the show. If anyone else wants to edit the show, we can probably use more editors. There's a lot of work for them to do. And thanks to our live studio audience here at this filming of The Nanny / The Final Word. It's been wonderful to have your smiling faces on the screen while we record this show.
We will do this again, and if you want to become a patron of The Final Word, patreon.com/The Final Word, the support we've received through that platform, especially since March last year when the pandemic started, has made all the difference, and it's the reason why we're able to make this program twice a week. We'll be back with the Glenn Maxwell mini-ep on Wednesday. Storytime will be coming out on Saturday. Our IPL speed round is on YouTube each Monday and Friday, and that is it. So thanks to everybody for listening. Thank you, Geoff, for all of your work as always, and we'll say goodbye here.
Bye.
You know what I meant here. I had to go.